I wonder whether you've been following the ecumenical lectionary for daily readings in the last few weeks. Perhaps most of you haven't, but if you had, you would discover that for quite a number of weeks now, the Old Testament readings have been in the prophet Isaiah. And it's been hard going. It's pretty dark and dismal stuff as God explains through Isaiah the realities of a world, of a people out of fellowship with himself. And I can remember when my wife and I were first married, we read a chapter of Isaiah each night. And by the time we got to chapters 38 and 39, it seemed as though we'd been reading this stuff for years. It was so depressing. There was just the occasional shaft of light. We know those wonderful passages in Isaiah 7 and 9, but apart from that, it seemed so miserable and dull and dark. And then one evening, we read, "Comfort, comfort my people." This morning, my younger grandson came in to visit his granny and grandpa and turned on the light when grandpa was not really fully awake. The light was so blinding that for a while I simply couldn't open my eyes to see. And the beginning of chapter 40 in Isaiah is a bit like that. It's this blinding light that suddenly shines out of the darkness of all that's gone before. And although the rest of Isaiah will sometimes contain passages where the odd dark cloud does drift across the sky, yet fundamentally from Isaiah chapter 40 onwards, there is this message of comfort and consolation. When the Hebrew in which Isaiah spoke repeats a word, it's usually for emphasis, or to use the old grammatical terminology, it's to express the superlative. So comfort, comfort my people says, overflowing comfort. And Isaiah is invited to speak, well, the versions always say tenderly. Actually, it says to the heart, because it's a love letter. It's a message of God's love that's addressed to the heart, to evoke a response in the heart to what is being said. Speak to the heart of Jerusalem and proclaim to her that her bondage has been completed. Now, the bondage, the servitude that is referred to here must be the servitude that has been the subject of the previous 39 chapters. The servitude that we experience as people out of fellowship with God and all the consequences that brings. But Isaiah is sent with a love letter from God to say that's ending. Sin has been paid for. The Old Testament has a very rich vocabulary for sin, and the word that's used here is the deepest one for sin, the deep interior corruption of sin. The old versions used to have it as iniquity. Yesterday morning, one of our friends died of cancer. And it's not the first time, nor will it be the last time, I doubt, that I witness someone close to me dying of cancer. And we know what cancer does. It eats away inside and destroys a person from within and leads inexorably, unless treated early, leads inexorably to death. And the word that Isaiah has in mind here for sin is that sort of inner corruption that has destroyed humanity, that has destroyed us, and requires not only a penalty to be paid for it, but also the healing touch of God to bring restoration. And then there's a lovely clause here too, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. It's almost as though what Isaiah is saying is to comfort us and to comfort his original hearers. Look, it's been pretty rough. But whatever you've experienced in the past, the future will be at least twice as good. It's a wonderful picture of God's grace. And so Isaiah's given a message. A voice of one crying in the desert, prepare the way for the Lord, make straight the wilderness, a highway for our God, because the way in which, for Isaiah, this situation is going to be turned around is by the intervention of God himself in that babe in the manger. But then we hear a voice. A voice says, cry out. Can I paraphrase that? I heard a voice reminding me that I had a message to give. A voice says, cry out. And Isaiah's response is, what shall I cry? Well, he's been told what to cry, but the implication is, can I really proclaim that? What shall I cry? All men are like the grass, and all their glory is like the flowers of the field. The grass withers and the flowers fall, because the breath of the Lord blows on them. Surely the people are grass. Lord, this is not a realistic message. How can I, in a world that's used to false promises, that's used to the fact that even that which is good seems to be tainted by the very touch, how can I go out and proclaim further promises, and this time promises that are utterly unbelievable? And the response comes. Isaiah, the grass does wither, the flowers fall, but the word of our God stands forever. Isaiah, you're not to look to what is humanly possible. You're to look to what God himself can achieve in fulfillment of his promise. And so once again, he is given a renewed message to prepare the way. When I was first in ministry in southeast London, we were in a pretty poor area. And I can remember one day wandering down to the poorest part of our community, turning a corner, and there was bunting everywhere. Unbeknown to me, the Queen was coming that afternoon, and these poor, impoverished people in this inner London, part of inner London, had done their best to welcome her when she came. And that's something of the picture here. You who bring good tidings to Zion, go up onto a high mountain. You who bring good tidings to Jerusalem, lift up your voice with a shout. Lift it up, do not be afraid. Say to the cities of Judah, here is your God. See, the sovereign God comes with power, and his arm rules for him. The king is coming. He's coming to do his business. He's coming to rule. But then we have verse 11. He tends his flock like a shepherd. This king who comes is the ultimate pastor. He comes like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms, those whose little wobbly legs are such that they can't yet walk. They need to be carried. He carries them close to his heart. Isn't that lovely? Close to his heart. And he gently leads the pregnant ewes who can't keep up with the rest of the flock because they've got too much extra baggage to carry with them. But it's a lovely picture, isn't it, of a God who treats us and deals with us individually at the point where we are in all our weakness and vulnerability and need. Now, we know that Isaiah's words found their fulfillment in the Lord Jesus. We also know, which Isaiah may not have perceived at the time, that actually what he predicted didn't come all in one lump. Jesus is coming again. But we do recognize, I think, if we have come to appreciate anything of what Isaiah has said, that there is a life that is working within us in places that once were dead, but now are receiving his healing touch. We do recognize one who deals with us at the point of our need. He doesn't force us to go faster than we can go. If we simply can't go any further, he picks us up and carries us. We do know one who has dealt with so many of our needs, above all, our lack of fellowship with him, and has restored us to fellowship with God. And so we can't but respond, can we? By recognizing that what we now are, if we know him, is infinitely better than the experience we once knew outside of fellowship with God. And I think this is an appropriate passage to have at the beginning of Advent as we prepare for the coming of Jesus, or the reminder of Jesus' first coming, because it helps focus us, helps us to draw from the stories that we will hear again over the coming weeks something of the infinite blessings that are ours because Christ has come.